The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy that flows through stars, planets, and the void between them. But what happens when something from beyond the stars arrives? Something that burns with a different kind of power entirely. A power that doesn't bow to the Force, doesn't recognize its ancient rules, and exists by laws written in a universe impossibly far away. The twin suns of Tatooine beat down mercilessly on the dune sea, baking the sand into waves of shimmering heat. Jawas scurried across the wastes in their sand crawlers, searching for salvage. Moisture farmers checked their vaporators. Tusken raiders watched the horizon from rocky outcroppings. It was a day like any other on this forgotten desert world at the edge of the Outer Rim, until the sky tore open. The phenomenon began as a distortion, a ripple in space itself that made the stars flicker and dance. Then came the sound, a thunderous crack that rolled across the desert like the roar of 1,000 banthas. Every living thing within 50 kilometers looked up to see a streak of golden light plummeting through Tatooine's atmosphere, trailing fire and impossible energy. It wasn't a ship. No engine screamed, no repulsor lifts engaged, just pure, burning force descending like a falling star. The impact crater measured 30 meters across and nearly 10 deep. Sand had fused into glass at the point of contact. Heat radiated in waves that distorted the air. And at the center, pushing himself up from the scorched ground, was a man who should not exist. Dooku stood slowly, shaking his head to clear the disorientation. His orange gi was torn and singed, his black hair wild and standing at odd angles. He blinked up at the twin suns, confusion crossing his features. "That's weird," he muttered, brushing sand from his shoulders. "Instant transmission never does that. And where am I? This doesn't look like King Kai's planet." He reached out with his key senses, searching for familiar energy signatures. Vegeta's fierce battle aura, Piccolo's focused intensity, even Krillin's steady presence. Nothing. The energy here felt different. Alive, yes, but flowing in patterns he'd never encountered before. It was everywhere and nowhere at once, like breathing in reverse. Not wrong exactly, just fundamentally other. "Okay, Dooku, think," he said to himself, floating a few inches off the ground experimentally. His ki responded, but it felt like pushing through water instead of air. Heavier, more resistant. "Okay, you were trying to get to Beerus's planet. There was that weird purple rift, and then... yeah, I definitely messed up." A distant sound caught his attention. Engines, mechanical and growling. Dooku turned to see strange vehicles approaching across the sand, hovering on cushions of energy. They were boxy and crude-looking compared to Capsule Corp technology, painted in faded desert colors. The beings riding them weren't human, short-robed figures with glowing eyes peering from beneath brown hoods. The Jawas had spotted the crash and smelled profit. Salvage this valuable didn't fall from the sky every day. But as they drew closer and saw Dooku standing in the crater's center, very much alive and apparently unharmed, their enthusiasm faltered. Their sensors couldn't read him. No cybernetics, no recognizable technology. Just biological readings that spiked off their instrument scales. "Hey there," Dooku called out, waving cheerfully. "Sorry about the mess. I'm kind of lost. Can you tell me what planet this is?" The Jawas exchanged rapid-fire chatter in their incomprehensible language, their glowing eyes widening. One of them raised what looked like a weapon, a crude ionization blaster, and fired a warning shot into the sand near Goku's feet. Goku looked down at the smoking patch of fused glass, then back up at the Jawas. His expression shifted from friendly confusion to something more serious. "Okay, so you're not friendly. Got it." He raised his hands peacefully. "Look, I don't want any trouble. I just need to figure out where I am and how to get." 3 more blasters leveled at him. The Jawas were chattering frantically now, clearly debating whether to flee or try to subdue this strange being. Goku sighed. This wasn't how he'd hoped first contact would go. Then new sounds cut through the desert air. Sharper, more powerful engines. Goku looked up to see a different kind of craft approaching. Sleek white speeders with imperial markings, carrying armored figures that even he could tell meant business. Stormtroopers, 8 of them, accompanied by an officer in a gray uniform and black cap. The Jawas scattered immediately, their sand crawlers kicking up plumes of dust as they fled. Goku watched them go, then turned his attention to the new arrivals. These beings moved with military precision, forming a perimeter around the crater, with weapons raised, more sophisticated than the Jawas' gear, but still recognizably guns of some kind. "Unidentified life form," the officer barked, his voice amplified through a comlink. "You are in violation of Imperial airspace protocols. Identify yourself immediately or be fired upon." Goku tilted his head. Imperial? Is that like a government? He floated up out of the crater, rising to stand on the sand at ground level. The stormtroopers' weapons tracked his movement, and he heard several nervous clicks as safeties disengaged. "I'm Son Goku. I'm from Earth. Well, not this Earth, I guess, since you don't seem to know what that is. I got here by accident. Is there someone I can talk to about getting home?" The officer's face had gone pale. It's flying, without propulsion. Get a reading on that energy signature." One of the troopers consulted a handheld scanner, then looked up in confusion. "Sir, the readings don't make sense. It's like he's generating power equivalent to a small fusion reactor, but it's biological. And the signature doesn't match anything in the database. It's not force-based, not conventional technology. I don't know what it is." "Force-based?" Goku echoed. "What's the force?" The officer's hand moved to his sidearm. This was beyond his training, beyond his understanding. Protocol dictated one response to unknown threats this powerful. Trooper TX-728, relay to command. Unknown entity with unprecedented power readings, requesting immediate Star Destroyer support and possible Inquisitor. He never finished the sentence. Goku moved, and in that moment, the Empire got its first glimpse of what Saiyan speed meant. One instant, he was standing 20 meters away. The next, he was in front of the officer, gently removing the comlink from his hand with a sad smile.
"Sorry, but I can't let you call for backup if they're just gonna shoot at me," Goku said. "I really don't want to fight you guys. I'm one of the good guys where I come from." He looked at the comlink, pressed a few buttons experimentally, then shrugged and crushed it casually in his palm. The metal crumpled like paper. 8 blasters opened fire simultaneously. Crimson energy bolts lanced through the air where Goku had been standing, but he was already gone, moving between the troopers faster than their targeting systems could track. He didn't hurt them, just tapped each one on the shoulder hard enough to short out their armor systems and send them tumbling unconscious into the sand. The officer stumbled backward, reaching for his blaster with trembling hands. Goku appeared in front of him again, and this time the Cyan's expression was more serious. "Look, I get that you're scared, but I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just want to understand what's going on and find a way home. Can you help me with that?" What are you?" the officer whispered. "I'm a Cyan. We're a warrior race, but I was raised on Earth, and I fight to protect people, not hurt them. So please, just tell me, what is this place? What's the Empire? And what's this Force thing you mentioned?" Before the officer could answer, a new sound cut through the air, a deeper, more ominous thrumming. Goku looked up to see a massive ship descending through the atmosphere, a wedge-shaped vessel painted in imperial gray that blocked out one of the suns. Smaller fighters screamed past it, TIE fighters with their distinctive twin-engine wail. The officer's fear transformed into something like vindictive satisfaction. "You wanted to know about the Empire?" He laughed shakily. "That's an Imperial Star Destroyer. You've been detected as a threat to Imperial security. There's nowhere in this galaxy you can hide now." Goku watched the massive ship approach, felt the power of its engines and weapons, sensed the thousands of life forces aboard. His key perception was still adjusting to this strange new universe, but he could feel their intent. Cold, militaristic, and absolutely certain of their authority. He thought about Frieza, about the tyrants he'd faced before, about armies that served evil masters and caused suffering across worlds. A not a familiar determination settled in his stomach. "I don't want to hide," Goku said quietly, his eyes never leaving the Star Destroyer. "I just want to understand what's really going on here before I decide what to do." He turned back to the officer, and his expression was earnest, almost pleading. "Is the Empire good? Do they protect people? Or are they more like the bad guys I've fought before?" The officer opened his mouth, then closed it. How could he explain the Empire to this impossibly powerful being? How could he justify the fear, the oppression, the iron fist of Imperial rule? In the end, he said nothing. Goku saw the answer in his silence. His shoulders sagged slightly, and he let out a long breath. "Yeah," he said softly. "That's what I thought." The Star Destroyer's hangar bays opened, and dozens of TIE fighters poured out like angry insects. He could feel their weapons powering up, targeting systems locking on to his energy signature. He rose into the air, ki flaring around him in a golden aura that made the air shimmer and the sand beneath him dance.
"I don't want to fight you," he called out, his voice carrying across the desert. "But I won't let you hurt anyone, and I won't let me lock me up. If there are people in this galaxy who need help, who are suffering under tyrants, then maybe I landed here for a reason." On the bridge of the Star Destroyer Devastator, Captain Davian Erse watched his tactical displays with growing unease. What in the Emperor's name is that energy reading? It just spiked another 300%. His sensor officer looked up, face pale. "Sir, if these readings are accurate, that single organism is generating more power than our entire reactor output. It's impossible. Nothing biological should be able to—" "Contact Lord Vader," Davian ordered, his voice cutting through the bridge chatter. "Tell him we found something he needs to see, and prepare the tractor beams. If that thing moves toward any civilian populations, we bring it down by any means necessary." Far below, standing in a crater of his own making on a desert world at the edge of the galaxy, Goku powered up to Super Saiyan. Golden light erupted around him, his hair standing on end and shifting to brilliant gold, his eyes becoming teal pools of focused power. The transformation sent a shockwave rolling across the Dune Sea, and every sensor in the Imperial fleet screamed warnings. "My name is Goku, and I think I need to learn a lot more about this galaxy before I decide whose side I'm on. But I promise you this, I will protect the innocent. That's what I do. That's who I am." If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Star Destroyer opened fire, and the Battle of Tatooine's Dune Sea began. But what neither the Empire nor Goku knew was that this moment, this first clash between Ki and the Force, was being felt across the galaxy by those sensitive to the cosmic currents. In his meditation chamber aboard the Executor, Darth Vader's eyes snapped open. On Dagobah, Yoda's ears perked up. And in the depths of Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine smiled. Something new had entered the galaxy, something powerful, something that could change everything. And the game was now in motion.
The Jedi Council convened within the hour. Holographic images flickered in the circular chamber as reports streamed in from across Coruscant's lower levels. Clone troopers described an entity that regenerated from fatal wounds. Security footage showed impossible movements, a figure dissolving into shadows, reforming from darkness itself, moving with speed that defied even the Force-enhanced reflexes of trained warriors. Medical droids reported casualties with wounds unlike anything in their databases. Puncture marks at the throat, bodies drained of blood, yet bearing expressions of euphoria rather than terror. Mace Windu stood at the center, his jaw tight with barely contained frustration. Whatever this entity is, it's already killed 17 people in the lower districts. The Senate is demanding answers we don't have. Killed or fed upon, Kiari Mundi corrected, his elongated head tilting as he reviewed the medical data. The precision of the wounds suggests selective feeding, like a predator culling the weak from a herd. A predator we cannot sense properly in the Force, Plo Koon added, his masked face turning toward Yoda. I've extended my awareness across the lower levels. Where this creature moves, there is absence, a void that thinks and hunts. Obi-Wan Kenobi stepped forward from where he'd been observing near the window. He'd arrived directly from a mission in the Outer Rim, his robes still dusty from combat. Masters, I've reviewed the security footage personally. This being demonstrated abilities that seem almost supernatural: regeneration, transformation, speed beyond measure. Yet it's not using the Force, at least not in any way we understand. Perhaps it is a Sith creation, Shakti suggested. Count Dooku has been experimenting with dark science. This could be a new weapon. Yoda's ears twitched, and he tapped his gimmer stick against the polished floor. Sith creation, this is not. Older it feels. Not of this galaxy. Not of this reality.
The chamber fell silent at that pronouncement. Kit Fisto leaned forward, his head-tail swaying. Master Yoda, are you suggesting this being is extra-dimensional? that it doesn't belong to our universe at all. Impossible to say with certainty, Yoda admitted, his ancient eyes troubled. But wrong it feels, as if the Force itself recoils from its presence, neither living nor dead, a paradox wrapped in darkness. Then we hunt it down and destroy it, Mace stated flatly, before it kills again, before it becomes a larger threat. Or, a new voice interrupted from the doorway. Anakin Skywalker strode into the chamber with his characteristic confidence, Ahsoka Tano following close behind. The young Jedi Knight's presence immediately shifted the room's energy, his connection to the Force powerful and raw, like a storm barely contained. "Anakin," Obi-Wan said with a slight edge of warning, "this is a council matter. A council matter about a potentially intelligent being that we're discussing exterminating without conversation," Anakin countered, stopping before the assembled masters. "I've read the reports too. Yes, it killed, but it also stopped when the clone trooper answered its questions. It didn't slaughter the entire squad. That suggests intelligence, restraint even." Mace's expression hardened. 17 bodies suggest otherwise. 17 criminals and gang enforcers in Level 1313's most violent sectors, Ahsoka chimed in, pulling up her datapad. Snips and I cross-referenced the victims. Every single one had outstanding warrants or known ties to Black Sun operations. This thing isn't hunting randomly, it's selecting targets.
"That makes it calculating," Ki-Adi-Mundi observed, "which makes it more dangerous, not less." Anakin's jaws set stubbornly. "Or it makes it someone trying to understand where they are. Masters, we faced Sith assassins, dark side cultists, nightmare creatures from the depths of wild space. None of them showed restraint. None of them asked questions. This being did both." Yoda studied Anakin for a long moment, his eyes seeing layers the young knight couldn't hide. The Council knew of Anakin's struggles with attachment, his occasional defiance of Jedi orthodoxy, his tendency to see good where others saw only darkness. It made him a powerful warrior, but also a liability. "Speak to it, you wish," Yoda asked quietly. "I think someone should before we make an enemy we don't need." Anakin met the ancient master's gaze steadily. "The war is stretching us thin enough. If this being can be reasoned with, if it can be convinced to leave peacefully, or even help." "Help?" Mace's voice cut like a vibroblade. "Anakin, this creature drinks blood and regenerates from death. You want to recruit it to fight alongside clones and Jedi? I want to understand what it is before we try to kill something that apparently can't be killed," Anakin shot back. The tension in the chamber thickened. Obi-Wan pinched the bridge of his nose, recognizing the signs of another ideological clash between his former Padawan and the Council's more orthodox members. Before the argument could escalate, every Jedi in the room suddenly stiffened. The Force screamed a warning. High above Coruscant's surface, where Separatist frigates continued their bombardment, something was happening. Clone pilots reported impossible maneuvers, a single humanoid figure, without ship or jetpack, moving through the vacuum of space as if swimming through water. It phased through shields that should have been impenetrable, walked across the hulls of warships, trailing shadows that seemed to devour light itself. And wherever it went, chaos followed. Alucard had grown bored of the ground. He materialized on the bridge of a Separatist frigate, stepping out of a shadow cast by nothing at all. Battle droids swiveled toward him, processors struggling to classify the threat. Red targeting lasers painted his chest. "Roger, Roger," one droid said uncertainly. Alucard's smile was all fangs. Indeed. The Kasul appeared in his hand, a massive handgun that belonged in museums, not space battles. He fired once. The .454 Kasul round, blessed and reinforced by supernatural will, punched through the command droid's chassis and continued through 3 bulkheads, decompressing 2 sections of the ship in an explosive chain reaction. The remaining droids opened fire. Alucard walked through the barrage, bullets and blaster bolts passing through him like he was smoke, reforming instantly. His second gun, the even more absurd Jackal, materialized in his left hand. 13mm explosive rounds tore through durasteel like paper.
Within 90 seconds, the bridge was a massacre of sparking metal and shattered machinery. "Dreadfully boring," Alucard muttered, holstering his weapons. "Not even screams, just clicking and beeping." He sensed something then, a presence approaching with speed and purpose, something that finally carried the weight of genuine power. His predatory instincts sharpened, and his smile widened into something genuinely pleased. Through the frigate's shattered viewport, a small starfighter approached. The force sang around it like a symphony, and Alucard could taste the flavor of its pilot even across the void. Young, powerful, conflicted, delicious. Anakin Skywalker's yellow Delta 7 Aether Sprite locked on to the frigate, R2-D2 beeping frantically in the astromech socket. "I see it, R2, Anakin muttered, his hands steady on the controls, despite what his sensors were telling him. A humanoid figure, standing in vacuum on the hull of an enemy frigate, without any life support. "Let's see if it wants to talk." He opened a broadband channel, broadcasting on all frequencies. "Unidentified entity. This is Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker of the Galactic Republic. Power down and prepare to be taken into custody for questioning." The figure on the frigate's hull turned toward him. Even across the distance, even through the cockpit's transparasteel, Anakin felt those eyes lock on to him. His connection to the Force wavered, not blocked, but confused, as if the universe itself couldn't decide if this being existed or not. Then he heard it. Impossible in vacuum, yet clear as if whispered directly into his mind. "A Jedi, how delightful. Come then, young knight. Let's see if your power matches your confidence." Alucard spread his arms wide, shadows exploding from his form like wings of liquid darkness. They spread across the frigate's hull, consuming metal and energy, growing larger and more terrible with each passing second. Within the shadows, shapes moved, twisted, hungry things with too many eyes and too many teeth. Anakin's hand moved to his lightsaber instinctively. Through the Force, he reached out, trying to understand what he was facing. What he touched was ancient, powerful, and utterly wrong. Not evil necessarily, but fundamentally opposed to life as the Force understood it. This was no Sith, No Darksider, no creation of Dooku or Palpatine. This was something that should not exist, and it was smiling at him.
The confrontation never happened. Just as Anakin's finger moved toward his weapon systems, just as Alucard's shadows coiled to strike, a new presence entered the battlefield with the weight of centuries and the cold precision of a master manipulator. Count Dooku's solar sailor emerged from hyperspace with elegant grace, its distinctive sails catching the light of Coruscant's sun. The former Jedi Master stood at the vessel's prow, his cape billowing despite the vacuum, sustained by the dark side of the Force. His presence was a knife of controlled darkness cutting through the chaos of battle. "Stand down, Skywalker." Dooku's cultured voice transmitted across all channels. "This matter is beyond your understanding." Anakin's teeth clenched. "Dooku, come to watch your droids fail again?" Quite the opposite. Dooku's vessel maneuvered between the Jedi fighter and the compromised frigate, a deliberate positioning that spoke volumes. "I've come to address our unexpected guest. Tell me, creature of shadow, do you know what you've stumbled into?" Alucard's eyebrow arched with interest. The shadows around him condensed, flowing back into his form like obedient serpents. Here was something different from the mindless droids and confused soldiers. Here was someone who radiated power. Genuine, cultivated, refined power that tasted of ancient philosophies and carefully controlled hatred. "I know I've interrupted a rather pedestrian civil war," Alucard replied, his voice carrying across impossible distances through sheer force of will. "Beyond that, I confess my ignorance. Do enlighten me. Count, was it? Count Dooku of Sereno, once a Jedi Master, now the leader of the Confederation of Independent Systems. And you are Alucard. No titles necessary. They tend to be pretentious. Though I must say, your former associates seem quite eager to destroy me without the courtesy of conversation. At least you display proper manners." In his cockpit, Anakin felt ice water in his veins. Dooku was negotiating. That meant the Sith Lord saw value or threat in this being. Neither option was acceptable. "Master, he's trying to recruit it." Ahsoka's voice crackled over the comm from her position in the Resolute's bridge. "I know, Snips. Stay sharp." Dooku ignored the Jedi entirely, his focus absolute on Alucard. Through the Force, he probed carefully, like a surgeon exploring an unknown organism. What he discovered made even his disciplined mind recoil slightly. This being existed in a state of perpetual contradiction, dead yet animate, empty yet conscious, absent from the Force yet undeniably present in reality.
"You're not of this galaxy," Dooku stated with certainty. "The Force does not touch you as it touches all living things, yet you possess power that rivals even the greatest Force users. Fascinating." The Force. Alucard tested the word. "That invisible energy your kind manipulates. How quaint. Where I come from, such things are considered myth." Where you come from is irrelevant. Where you are now presents opportunities. Dooku's vessel moved closer, diplomatic yet calculated. The Jedi Order you've encountered, they will seek to imprison or destroy you. They fear what they cannot understand, cannot control. They call it maintaining balance, but it is merely dogma protecting its own authority. And you offer an alternative? Alucard's tone was amused, but his eyes were predatory, calculating. I offer freedom. The Confederacy fights against a corrupt republic that has stagnated under Jedi guidance for a millennium. We seek to establish a new order built on strength, independence, and the courage to embrace power rather than fear it. Dooku extended his hand, a theatrical gesture heavy with dark charisma. Join us, Alucard. Your abilities would be invaluable in our cause. In return, you would have access to an entire galaxy, freedom to act as you choose, and allies who appreciate power rather than condemn it. Anakin's fighter banked hard, positioning between them. Don't listen to him. He's a Sith Lord. He's manipulating you. A Sith? Alucard's interest sharpened. Another unfamiliar term. Your galaxy seems full of unusual factions. The Sith embrace the dark side of the Force, Dooku explained smoothly, completely ignoring Anakin. We understand that true power requires passion, emotion, and the willingness to dominate rather than serve. Unlike the Jedi, who preach detachment and submission to their interpretation of cosmic will. Passion and domination, Alucard repeated thoughtfully. He looked between the Separatist leader and the Jedi fighter, between the offered alliance and the implicit threat. Then he threw his head back and laughed, a sound that echoed across the battlefield with manic glee. Oh, this is delicious. You think offering me servitude dressed in prettier words makes it less servitude. Your eyes blazed blood red. Count Dooku, I have existed for over 500 years. I have served precisely one master in all that time, and that is because she earned my loyalty through strength of will and absolute conviction. You offer me freedom to be your weapon, your tool, your subordinate in a political squabble I care nothing about? Dooku's expression hardened. You would refuse an alliance in a galaxy where you know nothing, have no allies, and are hunted by the most powerful order of warriors in existence. I would refuse to be owned, Alucard corrected, his voice dropping to something dangerous. I am not a recruit. I am not a soldier for hire. I am not a weapon you acquire and point at your enemies. Then you are a fool. Dooku's hand moved to his lightsaber. In war, there are only two positions, ally or enemy. If you will not join the Confederacy, you become an obstacle to be removed. The curved hilt ignited, crimson blade humming with barely restrained power. Around them, more Separatist frigates emerged from hyperspace. Dooku had come prepared for either recruitment or elimination. Alucard's smile widened impossibly. Finally, I was beginning to think no one in this galaxy had proper fangs. Anakin felt the battle shift before it happened, the dark side coiling like a serpent, Dooku gathering power for a devastating assault. But there was something else, something worse. Alucard's presence wasn't gathering darkness. It was darkness,
fundamental and absolute, pulling at reality like a black hole pulls at light. "All ships engage," Dooku commanded. Turbo lasers erupted from a dozen Separatist vessels simultaneously, converging on Alucard's position. The frigate he stood upon vaporized under the concentrated firepower, becoming a brief star of destruction that should have atomized anything within 100 meters. When the light faded, Alucard stood in the vacuum, untouched, his coat not even singed. "My turn," he whispered. The shadows exploded.
Not metaphorically, not symbolically, they erupted from Alucard like a tsunami of liquid night, expanding with impossible speed, consuming light and matter indiscriminately. Within the darkness, shapes manifested, his familiars, the souls he'd devoured over centuries, given temporary form and terrible purpose. Hellhounds, the size of gunships, tore through space on impossible winds. Humanoid figures in archaic military uniforms materialized on vessel hulls, tearing through durasteel with bare hands. And at the center of it all, Alucard grew larger, his form expanding into something biblical and terrible. A shape with too many eyes, too many mouths, all of them grinning with infinite hunger. Dooku's confidence cracked. This was not Force lightning that could be absorbed or redirected. This was not telekinesis that could be countered. This was something outside the rules he'd spent decades mastering. "All vessels full retreat," he commanded, his solar sailor banking hard. But Alucard was faster. The vampire appeared directly in front of Dooku's vessel, having crossed the distance in a single impossible moment. His hand, restored to normal size now, almost mocking in its casual humanity, pressed against the invisible shield protecting the Sith Lord. "Leaving so soon, Count, but we were just getting to know each other." Alucard's voice was silk over razors. Dooku's lightsaber slashed through the vampire's torso, the crimson blade cutting clean through. Alucard looked down at the wound bisecting him, then back up at Dooku, his expression one of exaggerated disappointment. "Really, after that entire speech about power and domination, this is your solution? I'm beginning to think your philosophy lacks depth." The wound sealed. Alucard's hand punched through the shield, simply ignored its existence, and grabbed Dooku by the throat. The Sith Lord's eyes widened as he felt the grip. Cold, utterly immovable, carrying the weight of something that predated galaxies. "Here's a lesson in power, Count," Alucard whispered, pulling the struggling Sith Lord close. "True power doesn't beg for followers. It doesn't need to recruit or convince or offer pretty words. True power simply is, and everything else adjusts accordingly or is destroyed." He could kill Dooku here, drain him dry, add another powerful soul to his collection. The temptation was there, sweet and seductive, but that would be wasteful, and Alucard, for all his monstrousness, was never wasteful. He released Dooku, shoving the Count back into his vessel with contemptuous ease. "Run along, little Sith. Tell your superiors that there's something in your galaxy now that doesn't play by their rules. Something that serves no cause, fights no war, and answers to no one." Dooku clutched his throat, his pride shattered, his understanding of power fundamentally challenged. Without another word, his solar sailor accelerated into hyperspace, abandoning the battlefield entirely. The remaining Separatist vessels followed moments later, drones and droids abandoning their attack patterns in favor of survival. Silence fell across the orbital space above Coruscant. Anakin's fighter drifted closer, weapons powered down but ready. Through the Force, he reached out again, trying to understand what had just happened. Alucard had refused the Sith. That should have made him an ally. But the way he'd refused, with such absolute contempt for both sides, made it clear this being served only himself. "What do you want?" Anakin asked finally.
Alucard turned those burning eyes toward the young Jedi, and for a moment, Anakin saw something behind the monster. Loneliness, perhaps, or boredom, or something more complex that couldn't be named. "What I've always wanted, young Skywalker." The vampire's form began to dissolve into mist and shadow. A worthy fight, a real challenge, something to make eternity interesting again. He vanished, dispersing across the cityscape below like crimson smoke on an unfilled wind. Anakin sat in his cockpit, hands trembling slightly on the controls, and realized they'd just made first contact with something far more dangerous than any Sith. Something that couldn't be reasoned with, recruited, or controlled. Something that simply existed and would continue existing, regardless of Jedi philosophy or Sith ambition. In the depths of the underworld, Alucard reformed in a shadowed cantina, ordered something called spotchka, and smiled to himself. This galaxy was going to be fun.
3 weeks passed, and the galaxy began to whisper. Alucard had vanished into the criminal underworld of Coruscant's lower levels, that labyrinthine maze of shadows and desperation where Republic law was a distant suggestion and survival was the only currency that mattered. He moved through the darkness like a ghost story come to life, appearing in cantinas and gambling dens, asking questions in a dozen languages he shouldn't know but somehow spoke fluently. The underworld learned quickly, the man in red was not to be trifled with. Black Sun enforcers who tried to shake him down were found drained and smiling in alleyways. Hutt cartel slavers who operated in his territory simply disappeared, their operations dismantled with surgical precision. Spice dealers, arms traffickers, those who preyed on the desperate, all became targets for something that hunted hunters. But Alucard wasn't mindlessly killing. He was learning. In a smoke-filled cantina on level 1782, he sat across from a Rhodian information broker named Tisk, who'd survived their encounter by being useful rather than threatening.
The Jedi try to keep balance. Try being the operative word. They're spread thin, fighting a war they didn't want, making compromises that erode everything they claim to stand for. Tisk's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. You ask me? Both sides are doomed. The Republic's rotting from within, and the Separatists are being led by fanatics and profiteers. This war won't end with victory. It'll end with ashes. Alucard's eyes gleamed with interest. Ashes can be quite beautiful. Far above, in a chancellor's office that commanded views of the entire Senate district, Palpatine studied holographic reports with carefully concealed fury. The vampire had become a complication. Not a major one, not yet, but complications had a way of cascading into catastrophes when left unaddressed. Alucard's presence disrupted carefully laid plans. His refusal to ally with either faction created an unpredictable variable in equations that required absolute precision. The Jedi have failed to contain him, Mas Amedda observed, standing at the Chancellor's shoulder. 3 separate attempts to apprehend the creature have ended in humiliation. Master Windu's team reported that their lightsabers passed through him as if he was smoke. Because he is smoke, and shadow, and blood, and nightmare. He exists in a state the Force cannot properly touch, neither living nor dead, neither light nor dark, a paradox wearing flesh. Then he's a threat to your plans, my lord. Perhaps, or perhaps he's an opportunity. Dooku failed to recruit him through promises of power. The Jedi failed to contain him through righteousness. But there are other methods of persuasion. He turned to his holocommunicator and activated a secure channel. The blue-tinged hologram that materialized showed a woman's silhouette, features deliberately obscured, voice modulated to anonymity. Asset 7, Palpatine said calmly. I have a task requiring your particular expertise. In the underworld, Alucard's predatory instincts suddenly prickled. He set down his drink and smiled. Someone's hunting me, he said conversationally to Tisk. The Rodian's eyes widened. What? How can you?
I can always tell when I'm being hunted. It's a delightful sensation, really. Like the universe suddenly remembers I'm supposed to be dead. He stood, adjusting his hat. Thank you for the conversation, my friend. Do try to stay alive. I'm growing rather fond of you. Before Tisk could respond, Alucard dissolved into shadows and was gone. He materialized on a maintenance catwalk 3 levels down, where the air tasted of ozone and rust. Around him, the city's underbelly hummed with machinery and desperation. And there, moving through the darkness with trained precision, were his pursuers. Not Jedi, not clones, something else. 7 figures emerged from the gloom, each one moving with the lethal grace of apex predators. They wore adaptive camouflage that shifted with their environment, and their weapons were unlike anything he'd seen in this galaxy. Organic in design, pulsing with a sickly green luminescence that spoke of bioengineering and dark experimentation. Assassins. Professional ones. The leader stepped forward, her features becoming visible as the camouflage faded. Human, perhaps 30 standard years, with cybernetic implants visible at her temples, and a coldness in her eyes that Alucard recognized immediately. Someone who'd killed so many times that death had become routine. Target acquired, she said into her comm. Alucard, you've made powerful enemies very quickly. I have a gift for it. Tell me, who sent you? The Count? The Jedi? Someone new?
Does it matter? Her weapon, some kind of plasma rifle grafted with biotechnology, powered up with a sound like screaming. You're not leaving this sector alive. Alucard's laugh echoed across the catwalk. Alive? My dear, I haven't been alive for 5 centuries. That's rather the point. They opened fire. The weapons were designed to counter Force users, scatter patterns that couldn't be deflected, plasma that burned hot enough to vaporize flesh before regeneration could occur, sonic disruptors that targeted neural tissue specifically. Against a normal opponent, it would have been devastating. Against Alucard, it was foreplay. He moved through the barrage like water flowing around stones, his body becoming intangible at will, reforming between shots with predatory patience. One assassin found herself face to face with him as he materialized from her own shadow, his hand around her throat before she could scream. Your weapons are impressive, but they're designed for living targets. I do hope your employer gave you hazard pay. He didn't drain her, not yet. Instead, he looked directly into her mind, peeling back memories with the casual brutality of someone opening letters. He saw her training, her contracts, her handler, and there, buried deep in encrypted protocols, he found the source. A Sith Lord sigil, but not Dooku's. Someone higher in the hierarchy. Someone pulling strings from shadows even deeper than these. Interesting, Alucard murmured, releasing the assassin. She collapsed, alive but traumatized, her mind reeling from the violation. The remaining 6 attacked in unison. Coordinated, professional, desperate. Alucard allowed them to damage him, to blow holes through his torso, to sever limbs, to believe for precious seconds they were winning. Then he showed them what true predation looked like. His familiars erupted from the pools of blood he'd deliberately shed. Hellhounds and nightmares and things that had no names in this galaxy's languages. The assassins fought well, maintained discipline even as reality unraveled around them. But discipline meant nothing against an opponent who could reform from a single drop of blood, who could attack from every shadow simultaneously, who could turn your own fear into a weapon.
Within 3 minutes, it was over. Alucard stood alone on the catwalk, surrounded by unconscious assassins he deliberately left alive. A message was more valuable than corpses. He looked up toward the distant spires where politicians and Jedi pretended they controlled the galaxy, and his smile was full of dark promise. So, there's someone even more powerful pulling strings, he said to the empty air. A puppet master who thinks assassins will solve the problem of me. How delightfully naive. He pulled out an archaic-looking hollow communicator he'd acquired, probably stolen, definitely functional, and hacked into the Republic's communication network with supernatural intuition that made mockery of their security protocols. His message broadcast across every Jedi Temple frequency, every Senate chamber, every military command center. To whom it may concern in this fascinating little war of yours, I am Alucard. I am not your ally. I am not your enemy. I am simply here, and I will go where I please, do as I please, and kill whom I please.
If you send more assassins, I will return them broken. If you send Jedi, I will educate them on the limitations of their philosophy. If you send armies, I will show you what real monsters look like." He paused, his grin widening. "But if you leave me alone to explore this galaxy at my leisure, I may occasionally interfere when something sufficiently interesting catches my attention. Your politics bore me. Your war is pedestrian. But your darkness," his eyes gleamed with hungry anticipation, "your darkness intrigues me. So do stay entertaining." The transmission ended. In the Jedi Temple, the Council convened in emergency session. On Sereno, Count Dooku listened with barely contained rage. And in his office, Palpatine's expression shifted from calculated concern to something approaching genuine interest. This vampire was either the greatest threat to his plans in 1,000 years or the perfect scapegoat for the chaos to come. Either way, he would need to be managed carefully. Very carefully indeed. Alucard walked into the neon-stained night of the lower levels, whistling a tune from a world this galaxy would never know, and disappeared into legends that would spread across 1,000 systems. The Crimson Shadow, they would call him, the Blood King, the Nosferatu of the stars. And in the dark places where law meant nothing and survival meant everything, his name became a prayer and a curse in equal measure.
The Battle of Ryloth should have been a Republic victory. General Windu had orchestrated the assault with his characteristic precision, clone battalions deploying in synchronized patterns, gunships providing air support, ATTE walkers advancing through the Twi'lek capital's occupied districts. The Separatist forces were in full retreat, their droid armies falling back toward their command ship in orbit. Then the shadows came. It started as a rumor among the clone troopers first, whispers of a figure in red moving through the chaos, neither fighting for Republic nor Separatist, simply moving with purpose towards something only he could sense. Command dismissed it as battlefield stress until the reports became impossible to ignore. Alucard had arrived on Ryloth 3 days prior, drawn by something he felt in the Force, despite not being connected to it. A disturbance, a wound, a scream that echoed across dimensions. The planet's suffering called to something fundamental in his nature, the predator's instinct to hunt those who create suffering for sport rather than survival. He found what he was looking for in a bombed-out settlement on the planet's night side. The Separatist occupation had been brutal. Twi'lek families enslaved, villages burned, resources stripped with mechanical efficiency. But one particular commander, a Nymodian named Sag Tis, who'd been personally appointed by Newt Gunray, had taken cruelty to art form. His droids didn't just occupy, they terrorized, they made examples. Alucard found Sag Tis in what had once been the settlement's community center, now converted into a makeshift throne room where the Neimoidian presided over auctions of Twi'lek slaves to Zygerian buyers.
The vampire materialized from the shadows at the back of the room, unnoticed at first, simply watching. The smell of fear was intoxicating, not the clean fear of battle, but the rancid desperation of beings who'd lost all hope. Children clutched their parents. The elderly stared at nothing. Young women and men were paraded before bitters with the casual dehumanization of livestock evaluation. Alucard's eyes burned crimson. "Lot 47, Sag Tis announced in accented basic, gesturing toward a Twi'lek family. "Father strong, suitable for mining operations. Mother experienced in domestic service. 2 children trainable for—" "No," Alucard said quietly. The entire room froze. Heads turned. Battle droids swiveled their photoreceptors toward the source of the interruption. Sag Tis's orange eyes narrowed in confusion and growing anger. "Who dares?" "I do." Alucard stepped forward into the light, his coat flowing around him like liquid shadow. "And you're going to release them, all of them, right now." Sag Tis's confusion transformed into sneering amusement. "1 organic against 50 battle droids and a dozen Zygerian slavers. Your courage is admirable but suicidal. Guards, eliminate this fool." The battle droids raised their blasters in unison. The Zygerians drew shock whips crackling with electricity. They never got to use them. Alucard moved. To the Twi'lek prisoners, it appeared as if the red-coated figure simply vanished and reappeared throughout the room in rapid succession, each appearance accompanied by the destruction of another droid or the scream of another slaver. To those with enhanced perception, like the Jedi who would later investigate, it was clear he was moving at impossible speeds, his body phasing between tangible and intangible at will. A battle droid fired point-blank at his head. The blast passed through empty air. Alucard reformed behind it and tore its central processor out with bare hands. A Zygerian slaver's whip wrapped around his throat. Alucard grabbed the electrified cord without flinching, pulled the slaver toward him, and whispered something in his ear that made the hardened criminal's face go white with terror before collapsing unconscious. Within 90 seconds, every guard lay in pieces or unconscious. Smoke rose from shattered droids. The Zygerians who could still move were scrambling for the exits. Sag Tis backed toward his throne, his hands trembling as he reached for a communicator. "This is Commander Tis, Code Red, unknown hostile in sector." Alucard's hand closed around the communicator, crushing it to powder. He hadn't appeared to move at all. One moment standing among the wreckage, the next directly in front of the terrified Neimoidian. "Do you know what I am?" Alucard asked conversationally, his voice pleasant despite the carnage surrounding them. "No, please, I have credits, connections, whatever you want. I'm something your galaxy doesn't have a word for yet. In my reality, they called me a vampire, a creature that feeds on blood and life force, a predator that hunts other predators." His smile revealed fangs that seemed to grow longer, sharper. "But I'm also something more complicated. I have rules, you see. Standards. I feed, yes, but I choose my prey carefully. He gestured toward the cowering Twi'lek families. These beings, they're not prey, they're victims, and I have opinions about those who create victims for profit rather than survival. I'm just following orders, Sag Tis whimpered. The Separatist Council demands. How disappointing, the just following orders defense. I've heard that one before. Alucard's expression hardened. 500 years ago, in a place called Germany, men used similar excuses while committing atrocities. Would you like to know what happened to them? He didn't wait for an answer. His hand shot forward, gripping Sag Tis by the face, lifting him effortlessly into the air. The Neimoidian's screams were muffled against Alucard's palm as the vampire's eyes blazed with cold fury. I'm going to do something I rarely do, Alucard said softly, his voice carrying to every prisoner in the room. I'm going to give you a choice. You can die here, right now, painlessly. Or you can live, return to your masters, and deliver a message. Sag Tis made desperate muffled sounds of agreement. Excellent. Alucard set him down almost gently, then leaned close. Tell your Separatist Council this. I am Alucard. I have no loyalty to Republic or Confederacy. But if I find operations like this, slavery, torture for entertainment, cruelty without purpose, I will end them. Violently. Personally. And no amount of battle droids will stop me. He released the commander, who collapsed to his knees, gasping, Now run. Sag Tis didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled toward the exit, his expensive robes trailing in the dust, his dignity shattered beyond repair. Alucard turned toward the Twi'lek prisoners. They stared at him with a mixture of terror and desperate hope, not sure if they'd been rescued or simply claimed by a new master.
The legend of Alucard spread across the galaxy like wildfire through a drought-stricken forest. In war-torn systems, his name became hope, proof that the powerful could be challenged, that cruelty would be answered, that something existed beyond the binary of light and dark. Freed slaves carried his story to distant worlds. Clone troopers shared rumors around campfires. Even Separatist droids updated their threat databases with a new classification, Unknown Variable Alpha. But Alucard himself cared little for legend. He continued his wandering through the galaxy with the curious detachment of a tourist exploring an alien world, which in truth he was. He hunted when hunting interested him. He intervened when cruelty crossed his personal threshold. He conversed with philosophers and criminals alike, finding wisdom in unexpected places and foolishness in the highest councils. The Jedi never stopped trying to understand him. Some, like Obi-Wan, treated him as a philosophical puzzle. How could darkness exist without corruption? Others, like Mace Windu, saw only threat. And Anakin looked at Alucard and saw possibility, a path outside the rigid doctrines that increasingly felt like chains. The Sith watched him warily,
Dooku nursed his wounded pride and avoided sectors where the vampire operated. Sidious incorporated him into calculations as an uncontrollable variable, not ideal but manageable if properly accounted for. And the war ground on. Order 66 would eventually come. The Empire would rise. The Jedi would fall. Palpatine's grand design would reach fruition. But in this timeline, one crucial element had changed. The galaxy knew that power existed beyond what either Jedi or Sith could command. Resistance movements would remember that monsters could hunt monsters. Future generations would whisper of the Nosferatu who walked between stars. Alucard would be there for all of it, watching Vader's fall and redemption, observing the Death Star's construction with academic interest, perhaps even crossing paths with a young farm boy from Tatooine who carried hope in his lightsaber and stubbornness in his blood. Because that was Alucard's nature, eternal observer, occasional participant, forever existing in the space between life and death, order and chaos, hero and monster. He had lived 5 centuries before arriving in this galaxy. He would live 5,000 more, watching empires rise and fall like waves against an immortal shore, hunting when the hunt pleased him, and laughing at the universe's futile attempts to categorize something that simply was. The galaxy far, far away had encountered something truly alien. Not a warrior from another dimension seeking conquest, not a lost soul seeking purpose, but a predator who had chosen his own morality. A monster who had decided which other monsters deserved to be hunted. A paradox wearing flesh who would remind this galaxy that power without wisdom was merely strength, and strength without purpose was merely noise. And in the end, that made all the difference.
"Are you a Jedi?" a young girl asked, her head tails wrapped around her shoulders for warmth. "No," Alucard replied, accepting a cup of local tea he didn't need, but appreciated the gesture. "Jedi use the Force. I'm something different." "Will you stay? Help us fight?" He looked at her with surprising gentleness. "I'll be here as long as I find the hunt interesting. But I'm not a soldier, little one. I'm a very old monster who's chosen to hunt worse monsters. That doesn't make me a hero." "It makes you something," an adult Twi'lek said, joining the conversation. Cham Syndulla, the resistance leader, regarded Alucard with cautious respect. "My people are grateful, but I have to ask, what's your endgame? Why Ryloth? Why us?" Alucard's expression grew distant, thoughtful. "In my world, I watched empires rise and fall, watched humans commit atrocities against each other with creativity that would impress your separatists. I served in wars, killed thousands, became a monster to fight monsters. When I arrived in your galaxy, I thought perhaps things would be different." He gestured toward the cave entrance, where distant explosions lit the night sky. "But cruelty is universal, it seems. Your war, Republic versus Separatists, Jedi versus Sith, it's just another version of the same story. Powerful beings using masses of vulnerable beings as chess pieces."
"So you're choosing sides anyway," Cham observed. "By helping us, you're opposing the Separatists." "No," Alucard corrected, his eyes gleaming in the firelight. "I'm opposing slavers and torturers who happen to be Separatist. If I found Republic forces doing the same, I'd oppose them too. I don't serve your factions, I serve my own sense of what makes an interesting hunt." Cham studied him for a long moment. "That's terrifyingly honest. I've lived too long for comfortable lies." Before their conversation could continue, Alucard's head snapped toward the cave entrance. His predatory instincts flared. Something was approaching. Something powerful and focused, cutting through the force like a blade through water. "You have incoming visitors," he announced calmly. "Jedi, if I'm reading the energy signatures correctly. 2 of them, powerful ones." Cham's hand moved to his blaster. "Are they tracking you?" "Almost certainly." Alucard stood, adjusting his hat. "Don't worry, I'll speak with them outside. No need to bring your sanctuary into this." He walked toward the entrance with leisurely confidence, emerging into Ryloth's perpetual twilight. Waiting for him on the ridge above were 2 figures he recognized from intelligence he'd gathered: Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. The Jedi had finally come calling.
"Alucard," Obi-Wan said, his hand resting casually on his lightsaber hilt, not threatening, but prepared. "We need to talk." "Do we?" Alucard smiled. "I thought your council's position was clear: containment or elimination. Have you come to attempt the latter? Because I should warn you, your lightsabers are significantly less effective than their wielders believe." Anakin stepped forward, his expression intense. "We're not here to fight. We're here because you're interfering in military operations. The camps you hit, we had intelligence operations running there. Assets cultivated over months. You destroyed all of that in one night. I liberated innocent beings from slavery," Alucard corrected. "If your intelligence operations required leaving them in chains while you gathered information, perhaps your priorities need examination." "It's not that simple," Anakin's frustration bled through. "War requires compromise. Sometimes you have to let small evils exist to prevent larger ones." Spoken like someone who's been the small evil being sacrificed. "I've lived through centuries of that philosophy, young Skywalker. It always sounds reasonable to those making the calculations, less so to those being calculated." Obi-Wan raised a hand, mediating. "Alucard, we are not saying you were wrong to free them, but operating independently in an active war zone creates chaos. People get hurt, missions fail, the Separatists adapt their strategies." "Good," Alucard said flatly. "Let them adapt. Let this war be complicated and messy and difficult. Maybe then the beings pulling strings from both sides will find it harder to orchestrate their grand designs." Both Jedi stiffened at that. Obi-Wan's expression became carefully neutral, the look of someone hearing a truth they'd suspected but hadn't voiced. "What do you mean, pulling strings from both sides?" he asked quietly. Alucard's smile was sharp. "Oh, come now, Master Kenobi, you're intelligent men. Surely you've noticed the patterns. How convenient it is that this war never quite ends.
how both sides always seem to have exactly the resources needed to continue fighting, how certain battles are won or lost at suspiciously opportune moments. "You're suggesting a conspiracy," Anakin said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I'm suggesting that old monsters recognize the work of other old monsters." Alucard's eyes gleamed in the darkness. Someone is playing both sides, someone patient, calculating, and very, very powerful. Your Sith Lords, perhaps? Or something even more deeply embedded in your Republic's foundation? The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Obi-Wan and Anakin exchanged glances, a conversation happening through the Force, weighing trust against suspicion, duty against instinct. "Even if you're right," Obi-Wan said finally, "what would you have us do? Abandon the war? Let the Separatists conquer the galaxy while we investigate conspiracy theories?"
"I would have you open your eyes," Alucard replied. "Stop treating me as an obstacle and start asking why a being with my power chooses to hunt slavers instead of conquering systems. I could be leading armies, could be carving out an empire. Instead, I'm freeing prisoners and annoying both your factions equally." He took a step closer, his presence somehow larger than his physical form. "I am not your enemy, Jedi, but I will not be your tool either. I will continue doing what I choose, when I choose, and if that occasionally aligns with your interests, consider it fortunate coincidence." "And if we can't accept that?" Anakin challenged. "If the Council orders us to bring you in?" Alucard's laugh was genuinely amused. "Then you'll try, young Skywalker, and you'll fail. And perhaps in that failure, you'll learn something about the limitations of your philosophy." His expression softened slightly. "But I hope it doesn't come to that. I'm growing rather fond of you both. You have potential to be genuinely interesting." Before either Jedi could respond, Alucard dissolved into shadows, his voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "Oh, and Skywalker, that darkness I sense in you, that anger, that fear, that attachment you hide from your masters, it's magnificent. Try not to let them crush it completely. The galaxy needs beings who feel deeply, not just peacekeepers who feel nothing at all." Then he was gone, leaving two Jedi standing on a windswept ridge, questioning everything they thought they understood about power, duty, and the nature of good and evil. In the shadows of the cave below, Alucard smiled to himself. The hunt was becoming very interesting indeed. The confrontation came, not on a battlefield, but in the depths of Coruscant's industrial sector, where the planet's machinery hummed with the heartbeat of a civilization built on countless layers of history and secrets. Palpatine had finally decided to address the Alucard problem personally. The Sith Lord descended into level 1313 without fanfare, without guards, cloaked in the Force to appear as nothing more than an elderly politician lost in the wrong district. He found Alucard in an abandoned power station, the vampire seemingly waiting as if he'd known this meeting was inevitable. "Chancellor Palpatine," Alucard greeted without turning around. "Or should I say, Darth Sidious? Your mask is impressive, but I've spent centuries seeing through deceptions." Palpatine's benign expression melted away, replaced by something cold and ancient. Yellow eyes blazed in the darkness.
You are perceptive, creature. Few have seen through my veil. I recognize another apex predator when I meet one. Alucard finally turned, his crimson eyes meeting Sidious's yellow. You've been manipulating this entire war, Republic and Separatists both, dancing to your tomb. Quite the elaborate scheme. And you threaten to disrupt it with your chaos. Sidious's hands crackled with barely contained force lightning. I cannot permit that. You cannot stop me, Alucard corrected. That's what terrifies you. I exist outside your carefully constructed plan, outside the Force itself, an unpredictable variable in an equation that requires absolute control. The Sith Lord attacked without warning, lightning erupting from his fingertips with enough power to level buildings. Alucard made no attempt to dodge. The energy tore through him, burning and destroying, yet he merely smiled as his body reformed, shadows knitting flesh and bone back together with contemptuous ease. Your force lightning is impressive, Alucard observed clinically, but I've been burned by hellfire and blessed silver. This is merely uncomfortable. Sidious's expression flickered, not quite fear, but recognition of genuine threat. He'd spent decades planning, manipulating, positioning every piece perfectly, and here stood something that simply didn't care about his grand design. They clashed then in earnest, Sith Lord and Vampire, two apex predators testing each other's limits. Sidious wielded the dark side with masterful precision, attacking from multiple angles simultaneously. Alucard countered with raw, undead power, his familiars manifesting as nightmares that even the dark side couldn't fully comprehend.
The power station became a war zone of supernatural forces, reality bending, shadows writhing, the Force itself seeming to recoil from their collision. But neither could gain advantage. Sidious couldn't destroy what refused to die. Alucard couldn't permanently harm what the Force continuously sustained. Finally, they separated, circling each other like ancient predators, acknowledging mutual respect. A stalemate, Sidious observed, his breathing controlled despite the exertion. For now, Alucard agreed, but I'll still be here long after your empire rises and falls. I'll watch your grand plan unfold, and I'll interfere whenever it amuses me. You can't kill me, can't control me, can't predict me. Then we are at an impasse. No. Alucard's smile was sharp. We're at an understanding. You do what old monsters do, scheme, manipulate, conquer, and I'll do what I do, hunt, kill, and occasionally disrupt your carefully laid plans when your pawns cross lines even I won't tolerate. Sidious studied him for a long moment, calculating costs and benefits with the cold precision that had toppled republics. Very well, Vampire. I will tolerate your existence for now. But know that if you truly threaten my ascension, I will find methods even you cannot regenerate from. I look forward to you trying. Alucard tipped his hat mockingly. Until then, do try to make your war interesting. I'd hate for eternity to become boring.
The Sith Lord vanished into the Force, his presence dissipating like morning mist. Alucard remained, alone in the darkness, and laughed, a sound that echoed through ventilation shafts and forgotten corridors, a promise and a threat to a galaxy that had never encountered anything quite like him. Above, the war continued. Clone troopers fought and died. Jedi struggled with impossible choices. Senators debated, while empires rose in shadows.
And through it all, Alucard walked. Neither ally nor enemy, neither hero nor villain. Simply a force of nature that existed because existence itself couldn't figure out how to stop him. On Ryloth, liberated Twi'leks whispered prayers to the Crimson Shadow. In the Jedi Temple, the Council debated his nature endlessly. In Separatist war rooms, commanders learned to avoid operations that might attract his attention. And in the criminal underworld, his name became legend, a monster who hunted monsters, a darkness that opposed cruelty, a paradox wearing Victorian clothes and an eternal smile. The Clone Wars raged on, but the galaxy had changed fundamentally. Something impossible had arrived and refused to leave. Something that proved power existed beyond the Force, beyond Republic law, beyond Sith ambition. Something that would watch civilizations rise and fall with the patient amusement of eternity itself. Weeks later, Anakin Skywalker stood on the temple's observation deck, staring out at Coruscant's endless cityscape, and wondered if Alucard had been right, if the darkness he felt growing inside him was something to embrace rather than suppress, if attachment and passion were strengths rather than weaknesses. The vampire's words haunted him. The galaxy needs beings who feel deeply, not just peacekeepers who feel nothing at all. In the Senate, Palpatine accelerated his plans, knowing now that timing would be critical. The vampire couldn't be controlled, but perhaps he could be redirected, used indirectly, made into a symbol of chaos that justified stronger central authority. And in the forgotten depths of the underworld, Alucard found a quiet cantina, ordered something approximating blood, and settled in to watch the greatest show the galaxy had ever produced.
The legend of Alucard spread across the galaxy like wildfire through a drought-stricken forest. In war-torn systems, his name became hope, proof that the powerful could be challenged, that cruelty would be answered, that something existed beyond the binary of light and dark. Freed slaves carried his story to distant worlds. Clone troopers shared rumors around campfires. Even Separatist droids updated their threat databases with a new classification, Unknown Variable Alpha. But Alucard himself cared little for legend. He continued his wandering through the galaxy with the curious detachment of a tourist exploring an alien world, which in truth he was. He hunted when hunting interested him. He intervened when cruelty crossed his personal threshold. He conversed with philosophers and criminals alike, finding wisdom in unexpected places and foolishness in the highest councils. The Jedi never stopped trying to understand him. Some, like Obi-Wan, treated him as a philosophical puzzle. How could darkness exist without corruption? Others, like Mace Windu, saw only threat. And Anakin looked at Alucard and saw possibility, a path outside the rigid doctrines that increasingly felt like chains. The Sith watched him warily. Dooku nursed his wounded pride and avoided sectors where the vampire operated. Sidious incorporated him into calculations as an uncontrollable variable, not ideal but manageable if properly accounted for. And the war ground on. Order 66 would eventually come. The Empire would rise. The Jedi would fall. Palpatine's grand design would reach fruition. But in this timeline, one crucial element had changed. The galaxy knew that power existed beyond what either Jedi or Sith could command. Resistance movements would remember that monsters could hunt monsters. Future generations would whisper of the Nosferatu who walked between stars. Alucard would be there for all of it, watching Vader's fall and redemption, observing the Death Star's construction with academic interest, perhaps even crossing paths with a young farm boy from Tatooine who carried hope in his lightsaber and stubbornness in his blood. Because that was Alucard's nature, eternal observer, occasional participant, forever existing in the space between life and death, order and chaos, hero and monster. He had lived 5 centuries before arriving in this galaxy. He would live 5,000 more, watching empires rise and fall like waves against an immortal shore, hunting when the hunt pleased him, and laughing at the universe's futile attempts to categorize something that simply was. The galaxy far, far away had encountered something truly alien. Not a warrior from another dimension seeking conquest, not a lost soul seeking purpose, but a predator who had chosen his own morality. A monster who had decided which other monsters deserved to be hunted. A paradox wearing flesh who would remind this galaxy that power without wisdom was merely strength, and strength without purpose was merely noise. And in the end, that made all the difference.